what is the difference between an allergy, a sensitivity, and an intolerance? I feel like when any of my clients have any symptom, we're always thinking like, is it a food? Or the client's always asking me like, is it something I'm allergic to? Is it something I'm intolerant to? What is even the difference? A lot of people like, will say I have X sensitivity, gluten sensitivity, dairy sensitivity, but we find out it might actually be an intolerance, and that actually changes how we navigate forward. So anyways, tell us the difference. Allergy, sensitivity, intolerance.
They are not synonyms is the first thing I'll say. And I think that's what you were kind of alluding to there. A lot of times those words are used interchangeably, and they are not really interchangeable, especially sensitivity and intolerance. Those are the two that I think kind of overlapped the most. So they are three separate buckets. And to your point, based on what you have, what we do about it is very different. And so first you have allergy, and that is one I think that is better understood, but still tossed around a little bit. An allergy is an immune response specifically to a protein in something. And so if you're allergic to strawberries, it's typically the little seeds on the strawberry that has the protein in it. You're allergic to that protein. To condense and consolidate, the protein comes into the body's immune system perceives that protein as a foreign invader, and your immune system basically attacks or goes nuts. And so when we talk about an allergy, it is usually a full body reaction. So it is your immunoglobulin E specifically, which is the subset of your immune system army that gets activated. And it tends to be a full body reaction, which is why things like anaphylaxis can take place, which is when all of a sudden your lungs, swell up and your entire body starts to go nuts, and it's life-threatening. So allergy, think full body immune reaction. Sensitivity is what I'd call a local immune reaction. So that's your immunoglobulins A and immunoglobulin G. Those two are more of our local. So they're the National Guard to our military, as a way to think about it in our immune system. You've always got the analogies. You know me. I've been doing this a long time, girl. So we've got sort of our local armies. And so they respond in the same way to a protein of some kind, and they cause a local response, and that can mean localized inflammation. A lot of times that locale is in the gut. And so food sensitivity testing is a common thing if you're investigating your body's local gut-specific immune response to the certain foods that it may be responding to. They are not as dangerous as a full-blown IgE-mediated reaction. They're not likely to cause anaphylaxis. They're not likely to have those acute life-threatening realities, but they can cause small local irritations that build up over time and create all sorts of digestive issues and can have downstream consequences if they're not acknowledged over the course of years. A lot of people do notice a symptomology related to it. There was a lot of popularity of the idea and group, the LEAP testing, way back in about 10 or 15 years ago. They were the original sensitivity test group that really used that as a process or framework to help people identify. And that's why they got mixed results, is if someone had food sensitivities, worked really well. If they didn't, then it didn't work really well. No different than the FODMAP diet, right? If people are lacking the enzyme, which would say they have an intolerance, we're going to get to that one in a sec, it works well. If not, it doesn't. So far we have allergy, which is full body immune response, sensitivity, which is local, typically gut response. And then we have intolerance. And your intolerance is actually typically the acknowledgement that you're lacking an enzyme or some part of the digestive process. The most common one is lactose intolerance, right? That means that your body does not have enough of or any of the lactase enzyme that breaks down lactose. So it goes through your small intestine undigested, and then it gets basically eaten by your gut bacteria and creates all sorts of gas and can create loose stools and a lot of discomfort. So you can hear where lactose intolerance is different than having a sensitivity to dairy, which is different than having an allergy to dairy. Dairy allergy means full body reaction, could be very dangerous. Dairy sensitivity means that the casein in the dairy has two types of protein, casein and whey. And then within casein, there's two subtypes, and usually beta casein is the type of protein that people have a sensitivity to. Getting a little downstream, apologies.
Now you know why our job is so fun.
And
truly, like, how do you understand or parse any of this stuff out if you're not a dietitian? I have no idea.
you may listen to what I'm saying just to continue to say, I have a gluten intolerance, even though we've just outlined that you probably have a gluten sensitivity or a gluten allergy. But it's to hear where there are these categories. They are recognizing that your body is not responding to it well, but how they're not responding is key. And the reason is the intolerance is typically a lacking of an enzyme. If you lack the enzyme, we may be able to give you that enzyme. Enter any person that's ever used Lactaid products.
A lot of times that's how I will parse things out with a client, trying to decide if it's an insensitivity or an allergy, is like, we'll have this food with the supplemental enzyme that should help break it down. And if that still doesn't help, then that was not the problem.
Yes, well said. That's one of the easiest ways to assess. Instead of sending them to do hundreds of dollars in sensitivity testing, why don't we rule out an intolerance by utilizing either a specific enzyme or a broad spectrum enzyme?
Yeah.
It's the $20 test instead of the $300 test. And like you said, if the intolerance is the problem, giving the enzyme will likely fix the problem.
Yep.
A FODMAP diet is an intolerance elimination diet. We covered eliminations in the last episode, but that is the observation that there are specific carbohydrates that we often don't make enough enzymes for, lactose being one of them. So you can start with the intolerance suspicion. Allergies are usually fairly obvious, which is to say they're full body. So there's hives or skin or dermatitis issues or some sort of breathing issue or itching or something that's more full bodied and recognizable. Sensitivities are the ones that are kind of in that weird middle that are kind of hard to figure out. The other reason is because sensitivities cause localized inflammation, but inflammation is what I like to call a bucket. There's a tipping point at which inflammation is so bad that it creates symptomology.
Yeah.
And so that's what ends up happening with the sensitivity is you may not actually have to avoid the food altogether.
Right.
One, how sensitive are you, which is to say how big of a localized reaction does the food create? Right. Two, how inflamed are you in general? Because you may have a food that is a mild sensitivity, but if you're otherwise uninflamed, it's just a quote unquote drop in the bucket.
Yep.
But if you're in a highly stressed, highly inflamed and physical reality, and then you eat that same food, that food could be the drop in the bucket that spills the bucket over and creates symptoms. So with sensitivity testing, that's the other criticism of it, is it's not truly diagnostic. What that phrase means is just because you have a sensitivity doesn't mean declaratively you shouldn't eat it. Allergy equals avoid. Absolutely. Sensitivity is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Right. And intolerance means intervention. That's I like to have that little alliteration on the ASI.
Can we say that one more time?
Yeah. So we have the allergy equals avoid. Sensitivity is on a spectrum, and intolerance means there's an intervention. And so
said.
If again, we'll go through that slower, but if there's an allergy, we're just not going to eat it. That's something we should avoid. There are really interesting allergy reintroductions and, microdosing that can help with allergies, but it's to say for general dietitian intervention, we're going to say, hey, those are foods we shouldn't be eating.
Yeah, that should be like a very supervised thing, medically supervised.
Well said. The sensitivity side, we can definitely navigate that spectrum with them. That may be doing a sensitivity test, which they're not extremely affordable. They're more affordable than they used to be. But a sensitivity test is going to come back and show you no response, low response, medium response, high response. But what's tricky is the measurements of low to high are a ridiculous range. It'll be a low response is 0 or is a 1 to 30. A medium response is 30 to 70. A high response is 71 to 14,000. And it's like, why are we treating a 71 like a 14,000? We may not need to. So there's a spectrum there. So we go, okay, yes, the higher the sensitivity response, the more likely it is to be an issue. But then we still don't know, is it an issue on its own? Which is to say you consume it in any amount and it's a problem. If so, we're going to treat that one more like an allergy. If you can consume it in small amounts or in moderation, that's something that's worth exploring. If you can consume it and not have it paired with other sensitivity foods, that's worth exploring. Or if it's something you avoid or minimize during periods when you're otherwise very inflamed. I have a client in particular who their sensitivity to fish shows up when they're super stressed. So when they're highly stressed, which is to say their bucket of inflammation is already high, fish is enough of a sensitivity to spill the bucket over. But when they're in a relaxed environment, they can consume fish without any issue whatsoever. So that's that weird gray area.
It's like the person who can eat fish on vacation.
Yeah. It's exactly what it is. And that this person I'm talking about would be an example of that.
Yeah.
When they're not stressed, their inflammation systems aren't as backlogged, their body flushes, their liver catches up, all their body systems catch up, and all of a sudden they can handle the mild inflammatory response or sensitivity related to that food. And so sensitivity is on a spectrum. It doesn't mean we should avoid it forever. Doesn't mean you can't have it. It means it may be contributing, and now we want to assess your bucket of inflammation, whether dietary or lifestyle, and then within diet, let's look at that. And if we have a bunch of high sensitivity foods that we're eating in combination, that may spill the bucket over. So as dietitians, we spend time helping people figure out the line.
Yep.
You know, what are the ones that we actually should just avoid? What are the ones that we should avoid in certain circumstances? What are the ones we might not want to pair very well? Let's navigate that gray. And then an intolerance is typically what can we do to intervene? Yeah. Sometimes it is minimizing, but a lot of times it's supplementing.
It's like a great example of this really is root cause medicine. It really is. Can I tell a client story? I wasn't planning on sharing. So this is related to an intolerance. I had a client who was going through pancreatic cancer treatment and started to malabsorb fats, was finding fat, like oil in his stool, and was like rapidly losing weight, having tons of pain and digestive discomfort. And it was the oily stool that really made me think like, I think I know what this is. It's something called steatorrhea, which means, you're malabsorbing fat and it's getting excreted because your body can't absorb it. And that made a lot of sense to me because he was navigating pancreatic cancer. But his cancer team is very used to seeing a lot of digestive discomfort and symptoms during cancer treatment because of how the drugs impact the body. But we just did a little test run and we added in some pancreatic lipase, and immediately his problem was solved. So that was like a very clear example of like, this was an intolerance, and it was due to an insufficiency of pancreatic enzymes, specifically lipase, which would make sense why we weren't producing enough pancreatic enzymes if we're dealing with pancreatic cancer.
Yeah.
And it was very easily fixable. He went through treatment. Now he's able to eat as normal now that his pancreas is kind of rehabilitated from treatment.
Well, that's great for him, first of all, but also what a testament to collaborative care.
Yeah.
You have these oncologists that are busy dealing with some of the most intense issues and struggles in modern
I can't
health.
do what they do.
No, absolutely not. Won't even pretend they're, only flowers to give on that front. But there are things downstream that also are worthy of support, and you start to hear the outcomes benefit. Without your role, he continues to lose weight and get physically weaker and weaker and weaker, which means he's unable to do the things required to beat the cancer. Because most cancer interventions at this point are poison the body just enough to kill the cancer, but not kill you. That is our strategy. And it's gotten more and more effective, and it's getting more and more targeted. So now it's try and poison certain areas instead of 20, 30 years ago where it was basically poison the whole body, and hope that because the cancer cells, they divide faster, they also die faster kind of thing. But we're getting more and more targeted, but ultimately we still are really, really using blunt force tools in that world. And so keeping a body strong during that's what we call nutrition support. Yeah. It's a case for dietitian in that role for sure, but congrats to him for beating it.
One more funny story is a dietitian who used to work on our team at a bachelorette party. I will let her remain unnamed. But we went out to brunch one morning and we had a lot of French toast and pancakes and just like really bacon heavy foods. And
I know exactly who this is.
Everyone came back from the brunch and was just like clutching their stomachs like, oh my God, I feel terrible. And of course, this dietitian, wicked smart, starts handing out digestive enzymes to people.
You get a lactate, you get an enzyme, you get a galactosidase.
Just as like a little boost in digestive support, and man, did it work. And since then, I keep them in my cabinet, especially for dinner parties and things.
Reason number 170 to be friends with a dietitian. They bring enzymes. There.
They come prepared.
Oh man, I love that. Great share.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so that was a great explanation. So there's allergy, there's sensitivity, there's intolerance. We want to figure out which one it is because we can approach it differently. The other cool thing about like something like an intolerance is like when you add in that like a lactate, for example, all of a sudden you can't enjoy ice cream again. Yeah. Or in the case of like someone who has congenital sucrose and maltase deficiency, which I see every once in a while, it's like we could just give them sucrate and all of a sudden they can live a very normal life now, whereas someone who truly has an allergy or sensitivity, very different.
Yes, that's why it's so important is people calling if it's an intolerance and they're calling it an allergy, we are if it's an allergy, we're avoiding it. If it's an intolerance, we're intervening. And so if you have an intolerance and you're calling it an allergy, you're avoiding instead of intervening, which means you're being more restrictive than you need to be.
Yeah.
So there's different pathways, and yeah, that's the role that we get to play. It's one of my favorite ones to help people navigate, especially because, to your point, it's so misunderstood. It's I'm allergic to this thing, and it's like, well, no, you're not, because that's not science. But let's talk about what symptomology are you dealing with. Let's better understand why you say you're allergic. What do you mean when you say you're allergic? Because you don't mean it in the word. But hopefully now everyone listening understands 1,000-foot view what an allergy, sensitivity, and intolerance is, and can hopefully better navigate for their own personal benefit.
My last note is the one scenario where an sensitivity, an intolerance, or even a preference can turn into an allergy is when you're at a restaurant. As a server, everyone had an allergy to something.
Yeah.
Crazy how that works.
Isn't it funny? That is. Because it's a spectrum, there's that. If I say allergy, no one's gonna debate it. Right.
Written in red on your ticket.
It's the difference between a service dog and a well-trained dog. If I'm being honest.
She's right there.
Hey, Rem. She's knocked out. I'm proud of her.